Hey everyone, welcome to the very first episode of Paraiso Podcast, where we dive into issues that really matter. I'm Andre, your host for today.
And I am Lois, your co host. We're so glad to have you here. Today, we're diving into an important and urgent topic climate change.
That's right, climate change is something that's affecting our world in ways we can't ignore. We'll be discussing it because its impact and why so many people are still not taking it seriously.
Before we get started, let's introduce our amazing guest for today. They'll be sharing their insights and experiences with us.
Absolutely. Joining us today are our group mates, Sean, Mikaela, and Marina. They're here to help us break down this critical issue.
And of course, this is Paraiso Podcast, where we tackle real world issues with real people. The purpose of our podcast is that we will deliver informative podcasts about the lack of awareness of climate change. So, what's on the agenda today? Well, we were diving into the complexities of climate change, what it is, why it's happening, and why it's being ignored by so many. The first thing we want to address is why do people still not see this as an urgent issue?
So before we start, let's first have our guests to inform us of the important question. What is climate change? Change. Sean?
Hello. So climate change refers to the long-term alteration of temperatures and typical weather patterns in place. It's mostly caused by human activities like burning fossil fuels, deforestation, and industrial processes, all of which release greenhouse gases into the atmosphere.
Yes, if I may add, we're already feeling the effects. Rising sea levels, extreme weather events, and disruption in ecosystems. Ignoring climate change means risking our future, including environmental, social, and economic stability.
So, despite these impacts, people are still not taking climate change seriously enough, and we're here to explore why that is. There is complacency, misinformation, political inertia, and more.
To
Sean?
add on Yes. To add on that, on the other hand, a lot of people think that climate change is something that's going to happen in the distant future. But in reality, it's already happening today. Whether it's more frequent wildfires, floods, or heat waves, it's happening right now. But many people just don't feel the urgency to act. Furthermore, psychological wise, humans are wired to respond more to immediate effects rather than distant ones. Climate change can feel abstract, especially when people are not seeing the effects right in front of them. Aside from that, the media also plays an important role. You see, climate change is sometimes downplayed by media, or stories about it are drowned out by other news. People are not constantly reminded about the severity of the issue. A good example of this is how some communities in coastal areas still aren't taking measures to protect against rising sea levels. For instance, some communities in Davao don't have responses to things like floods and so on because they believe that it won't happen for another decade or so when it's actually a much more immediate concern.
I also want to point out most governments are not enacting enough policies to tackle climate change. They might introduce small scale changes, but the bigger systematic shifts needed aren't happening fast enough. Many governments are influenced by powerful corporations and economic interests that benefit from fossil fuels. This often leads to delays or lack of policy changes. International cooperation is vital, but countries are often caught up in political infighting and self interest. The Paris Agreement, for example, saw varying levels of commitment, and some countries have already started to backtrack. Corporations, especially in the fossil fuel industry, spend millions lobbying governments to weaken climate policies. This undermines efforts to take meaningful action. For instance, the delay in transitioning the renewable energy sources is contributing to more severe global warming impacts, which could have been mitigated with earlier intervention.
So to further expand, so we all know that one of the biggest issues with tackling climate change is the amount of misinformation out there. The media and politics sometimes twist the narrative, making it seem like climate change isn't as urgent as it really is, or worse, that is not even real. So, what makes it even harder is that some industries, especially those with a lot to lose, like fossil fuel companies, actually fund denial campaigns to protect their profits. So they spread doubt and confusion to make people question the science. And because myths about climate change keep getting repeated, a lot of people end up believing things that aren't true. So I think all of us here use social media, right? So we all know that social media only makes it worse since false information spread so quickly, often faster, often faster than the facts. It's so easy to share posts without checking if they're accurate. In the end, all this misinformation creates public confusion and makes people hesitate to take action. It's frustrating because we need everyone to understand the problem so we can start working on real solutions rather. So, what I'm hearing is that if we don't take action, we'll take we'll see more wildfires, hurricanes, and droughts. These disasters will come more frequent and severe, causing widespread devastation. Ignoring climate change will also have massive economic consequences. Crops will fail, industries that rely on stable weather patterns will suffer, and entire economies could be disrupted. And climate change also disproportionately affects vulnerable populations. As temperatures rise, natural disasters worsen, we'll see more migration, health problems, and increasing inequality. Climate change could also lead into global conflict as countries compete for increasingly scarce resources like water and arable land. Um, Furthermore, there's an ethical dilemma here too. If we don't take climate change seriously, we're jeopardizing the future of the planet and survival of vulnerable populations, especially in developing nations.
So what can individuals, governments, and corporations do to take climate change seriously? Because of that, I must say it's a time for all of us to step up. Government Governments needs to prioritize climate policies, corporations need to adopt sustainable practices, and individuals need to reduce their carbon footprints. Marina?
So look, we cannot afford to just sit back and ignore what's happening. Climate change is already affecting us, and it's only getting worse. The thing is, we all have a part to play. No action is too small. Whether it's reducing waste, using less energy, or even just spreading awareness, every effort counts. But more than that, we need to push for bigger changes, like holding companies and governments accountable. So this isn't just a problem for scientists or activists to solve. It's a global issue. And if we all step up and work together, we can still make a difference. The time to act is now, before it's too late.
To add on that, I also believe that education plays a huge role. Like we need to raise awareness about the urgency of climate change so that people could start taking action and also demand change as well from those in power, like in our government.
Yes, and policies need to change now, and we all need to hold our leaders accountable. Whether it's pushing the for cleaner energy, sticker regulations, and more green initiatives. The time for action is now.
I think we can all agree that change is needed and that we have not much change in our country, especially in the Philippines. That's why we need to encourage them that people need to take climate change seriously right now. Um, Climate change is a reality that we can no longer ignore. We must take it seriously if we want to ensure a livable future for ourselves and future generations.
Yeah, I agree on that. And in the end, the choices we make today will shape the future for generations to come. Taking action now means protecting our environment, creating sustainable communities, and building a healthier planet. It's not just about avoiding disaster, it's about creating a better quality of life for everyone. So, on the other hand, if we do nothing, the risks are huge, such as rising temperature, extreme weather, food and water shortages, and so much more. The cost of inaction is far greater than the effort it takes to make a change. We still have a chance to turn things around, but we have to act before the damage becomes irreversible. The future is in our hands. Let's choose to protect it.
In addition to that, climate change isn't a problem we can solve alone. It will require a united global effort, the governments, corporations, and individuals all working together to make a difference.
To add on that, I think it's safe to decide that it's up to us to take action and that the sooner we act, the better off we'll be.
That is right. The clock is ticking and we can't afford to waste more time. Every little bit helps.
So, we have to fight for a better future. If not for us, then for the generations that follows.
Now, let's open the floor to some questions from our listeners.
We've got some interesting questions lined up, so let's dive right in.
Sean, what do you think is the biggest psychological barrier preventing people from taking climate change seriously?
What's the most what's the biggest psychological barrier? That's a tricky question, but if I were to answer that, I think it would be that the denial that the people have when it comes to believing if climate change is really real. Because we see things in social media, especially that they say that climate change is not real, climate change is not going to happen, even though it already is, and that nothing will happen to our communities. When in truth, it's going to happen. And I think that's the greatest psychological barrier is that people don't believe climate change, that people would rather believe to themselves and believe fake things that we see on the internet, which I think is very, very discouraging because, of course, we have a long way to go before we solve climate change, and it takes the effort of many. People being unaware of this stuff is not helping our cause to fight for a better future and fight for a paradise that we all want to achieve. Yeah, and I think that's my answer.
Thank you for your wonderful question, Sean. So, Kai, you mentioned earlier the importance of policy change, right? So, what steps should governments prioritize to curb climate change?
In order to tackle climate change, governments need to focus on a few key areas. First is that they should set clear goals to cut carbon emissions and move away from fossil fuels by supporting renewable energy such as solar and wind. It is also important to make buildings and industries more energy efficient and to put a price on carbon to encourage businesses to reduce their environmental impact. Protecting forests and other natural ecosystems is also crucial as they help absorb carbon and keep our planet balanced. At the same time, governments should also invest in new green technologies and prepare communities for the impacts of climate change, making sure people and infrastructure are ready for the challenges ahead. Finally, cooperations is key as climate change affects us all, and working together is the best way to make a real difference. These actions can create a healthier planet and a more sustainable future for everyone.
So thank you for that, Kai. So Rina, what's with so much misinformation surrounding climate change? How can we combat this denial and spread the truth?
So here we go for the misinformation again. That's a great question actually. One of the best ways to combat climate change denial is through education and awareness. We all know that. We need to make sure people have access to reliable, science-based information and help them understand the facts in a clear and simple way. It also helps to call out misinformation when we see it, whether online or in conversations and share credible sources to correct it. Engaging with communities is important too. Having open discussions can break down misunderstanding and build trust. Plus, we should support policies and leaders who prioritize climate action and push for transparency in media and politics. The more we work together to spread the truth, the harder it becomes for denial to take hold. That's all. Thank you.
So again, this is Paraiso Podcast. Thank you for listening, everyone, and have a blessed day. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.